Hey, thanks for jumping on to this session of the Pit Therapy Podcast. You got Kyle here, and we're joined with Trevor and Josh. How you guys doing?
Good, man.
Good. I'm working on a
It's good.
Pinewood Derby car today.
That's old school. Is it like no rules, or can you
Oh no,
weight
there's
it? Can you
rules.
put rockets on it?
I've got like a list of rules, but like I've got bent axles, I've got polished wheels, all this stuff, dude. I'm gonna win. I'm walking away with $100. This is at work, by the way.
Nice.
That's what we do at work. We don't work. We gamble.
It sounds like a good job to me.
I wandered out into my backyard today, and we have a building right behind us, and one of the water filters busted. And no lie, I had 3 inches of water in my back corner where this building was just dumping. And my neighbor behind me, she probably had 6 inches in her corner because that's where the storm drain is. That was a fun thing to walk back to.
Sounds like a lot of dadding.
A lot of dad work.
Well, I'm down here in Texas trying to not melt because it's at least 200 Kelvin outside.
My buddy said it's like 117 heat index or something.
Yeah, I think it was like 8 o'clock at night and still 100 degrees outside.
Dude, I can't handle over like 80.
What do you guys have updates, news from the scene? Any tours, any albums? What have you guys been listening to?
So tour wise, saw Silverstein's coming through with Stray from the Path and Avoid for 10-year anniversary of one of their albums. That seemed like a little bit of a weird lineup to me. Stray from the Path with Silverstein. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that, but it feels like another mixed bill show like what we used to go to.
I haven't really listened to Straight from the Path in, I don't know, probably a couple of years. Mixed bills have kind of seem like they're coming back, which is like a good and a bad thing. But I think it'd be pretty cool.
Going back and listening to older Silverstein, they were heavy enough, I feel like, to play with Stray from the Path. I don't know the other band, Avoid.
I listened to Avoid a little bit last night when I saw the tour coming through. They're a good band. I definitely think I want to dig into them a little bit more and listen to more stuff after listening to a few songs. They're newer. And yeah, Silverstein's heavier, but it was, again, the post-hardcore emo scene kind of coming through. And Straight from the Path, they're political hardcore, right? It just seemed kind of weird that way to me. Like I felt like Straight from the Path should be with some more hardcore bands, Comeback Kid or something like that. And Silverstein it didn't seem like the right fit. But that it's the type of show we used to go to.
We've got Momentum is playing at Wild Pepper Pizza on 7/24 with two locals, Repulse and Zodiac Killer. I don't know if you guys have ever listened to Momentum, but they're pretty sick. They all kind of share members between like Vamakara and Hands of God, just all those guys from like the Bay Area, which is Say Your Goals is a Bay Area band, so that's kind of cool. I'm sure they're all intertwined at some point. And then one other show that was pretty cool that got announced a while ago was Cannibal Corpse is coming this fall. The most metalish band, that's been doing it since the early 90s. Like if you're into that, that's definitely a band you should check out.
Who are they playing with?
Let me look. So
it was Cannibal Corpse that's in Ace Ventura, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If they would actually do their band logos legible, I could tell you, but honestly looks like a ripped seat cover. So, I mean, that should tell you right then and there that the show is going to be sick.
It's going to be sick. It's going to be a lot of fast circle pit metalheads, dude. It'll be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say this week I've been listening to a different mix of kind of softer stuff. You brought up This Wild Life. They actually just dropped a new album, and It's awesome. They've got a lot of guest vocalists. The lead singer of Yellow Card is actually jumping in and playing a song with them. I actually think every song on that album has a guest vocalist. I can't remember them off the top of my head because I haven't really dug into the album yet, but the songs I've heard are awesome. I am totally obsessed with the new songs that Movements released. Tightrope is one of the coolest songs I've heard in a while. That song is so good. As cheesy as this sounds, the new Kelly Clarkson album just dropped. And I don't know if you guys know the history of Kelly Clarkson. First of all, she's got to be one of the best vocalists of our time. She's incredible.
Yeah.
She got divorced, I guess, a few years ago, and this new album is basically kind of hashing that out and digging into it. And she does not pull back on any of these songs with her lyrics about her ex-husband. I'm to a point with people like Kelly Clarkson or Taylor Swift. If you date a female songwriter,
you're doomed.
You're doomed. Like sign an NDA, figure something out.
Taylor Swift treatment.
Yeah, I mean, just go listen to the new Kelly Clarkson album. I mean, you can appreciate it because she's an incredible singer. It's not like necessarily my type of music, but I appreciate it. But she's savage in it. It's pretty cool, actually.
Nice. Well, one band that, and this will lead into what we're talking to today, but as I was going through and learning about some stuff about Set Your Goals, the producer for the first two albums, his name's Zach Oren. He has a band called Darkness Everywhere, and I threw that on just listening to kind of what he was doing in preparation of kind of figuring out how he fit into Set Your Goals. And this band is melodic death metal. You'd actually like see them on like tour with probably like an All That Remains, As I Lay Dying, August Burns Red. But then I wouldn't be surprised to see them with like a Black Dahlia or an Amon Amarth type of band. The album is called, or their EP is called The Seventh Circle. Just some good metal music, double bass drum fills, fast tremolo picking, the galloping riffs kind of stuff. Yeah, it was a pretty solid metal album for a band I hadn't heard of prior.
What was the band called again?
Darkness Everywhere. New EP was just 2022, only 7 songs on it. So it's a new band. And the vocalist is in a band. He was in Light This City. And then they're in a pop punk band right now called Heart Sounds. It's all one word. It kind of brings it full circle to Set Your Goals.
Yeah, if anyone's got any additional new bands, new tours, hit us up on social media. Let us know. But getting into the topic of today, I want to start with a couple questions for you guys that will lead into it. So, number one, what are some of the wildest concerts that you've been to that were not a traditional hardcore bill?
I went to one in 2006 at this place called Club Ice. I don't know if you guys ever remember that place. It burnt down in like 2007. Every Time I Die was supposed to play, and they dropped off the bill. And so the bill was actually He Is Legend, From First to Last, and Story of the Year. In 2006, that was like a prime time for a lot of those bands. That was when From First to Last still had Sonny Moore. He Is Legend, I think, was on their most popular record, and Story of the Year as well. They had released Page Avenue not long before that tour. What was wild to me about it was how thick the crowd was when Story of the Year played. I still remember my eardrum like visibly like shaking. And I think ever since then, I have not been able to hear properly. But they put on a wild show too. Like, they were the band that was known for pulling out love sacks, doing backflips off of their amps and things like that, chucking stuff across, and they just had a good time. Probably another wild show is kind of a curveball. I would say I went because I wanted to, but I got suckered into going to the show at the Complex a few weeks ago. The band was called Dark Funeral. Very black metal. Like, I'm talking, they came out in like full black gowns, white painted faces, totally out of my norm. Like, and I think what was wild about to me is like, you're talking about circle pits and stuff like that in the beginning. That's not a thing in Salt Lake. And this whole room was just moving in circles. And I'm like, oh man, it actually, I guess they do exist. You just got to be at the right show. And I'm totally like outfitted. I'm standing there in camo shorts and Air Maxes with some hardcore t-shirt on, like the shaved head up on the corner. And everybody else, I kid you not, is like head to toe in like spikes and just painted Joker faces and all this stuff. But I guess, that's just what they do,
Corpse paint.
Yeah. It was pretty interesting.
Heck yeah. No, if I think back to it, trying to get out of kind of hardcore, some of the bands that I think back on are Tiger Army. And maybe that's a cop out because it's punk. And so like Tiger Army would sometimes come around with like Cancer Bats, some of those psychobilly type of shows. Those were always fun. You want to kind of go the trendy route, Breathe Carolina, Icy Stars, getting that techno fix in there kind of thing. And then the pop punk scene, Newfound Glory, 4 Year Strong. Everyone goes hard for those guys.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I'm going with this. And the reason why is because today we're going to be talking about Set Your Goals. And I can remember some of the wildest, most aggressive shows that I've been to have been, ones that Set Your Goals were on the bill for. and people coming out for Set Your Goals too, right? To jump in and kind of introduce Set Your Goals to everyone that might not know them. So they're a pop punk band from the Bay Area, San Francisco. They formed in 2004. Band name is derived from a Civ album that has the same name, Set Your Goals. And they've got one EP and 3 full-length albums. And they were pretty consistent as a band up until about 2013, 2015. They had a break, and I think we'll talk a little more about why I personally think they had a break. But it looks like that there's actually a little bit of resurgence with them lately. I think they've started playing a few festivals in California again and are seeing some life back and Set Your Goals. So that's just a good intro.
Do you guys know much about Civ, or did you look into Civ very much?
I've listened to Civ, but not like punk history, but not something consistently I ever put in my headphones.
So because of seeing that they had derived from it, I kind of dove into Civ. And they come from Anthony Civarelli, who was the vocalist for Gorilla Biscuits. So the New York straight edge hardcore scene is where these guys came from. But they're a really interesting sounding band, specifically the album Set Your Goals. I listened to the whole thing. It's described as hardcore with an upbeat tempo when you like look it up online, but you start listening to it and there's straight hardcore, there's some pop, but then there's swing riffs on there. Like they could have been playing with the Cherry Poppin' Daddies kind of thing. Like it's that level of swing. So it's super interesting. But as you listen to it, there's a lot of the gang vocals, a lot of the faster to the slowing down style, hardcore pop punk style. And listening to that album, it really feels like Set Your Goals not only took their name from it, but took their initial sound and modernized it a little bit. And it was a really cool thing to see that Set Your Goals had the opportunity to actually tour with Gorilla Biscuits in 2006 to show kind of that old school hardcore meeting the melodic hardcore pop punk that is Set Your Goals. Right. So I thought that was all super interesting listening to that.
I might get in trouble saying this, but I think the best pop punk is the pop punk that has roots in hardcore. You know, looking at some of the newer stuff like Koyo and No Doubt, not No Doubt, No Doubt's sick, but I meant No Pressure. You can just feel the energy. You can feel, you know, the same type of aggressiveness and, you know, all the stage diving and good pits that you get at hardcore shows. Some of these pop punk bands that are rooted in hardcore, it's such a, to me, like a higher tier of pop punk than, you know, a lot of like the sad boy era pop punk or some of the old like 90s, you know, Blink pop punk, which is still good in its own place. But personally, and this is why Set Your Goals has always struck such a chord with me, is it's fast, it's positive, it's, you know, upbeat, but it gets heavy. There's gang vocals, there's breakdowns, there's, you know, it's political. So it does have its roots in punk as well. And it ticked all the boxes that I think a hardcore band should have, but with a pop punk feel. So getting into their albums, I actually had not really known about their EP before I dove into them more. I know I'd heard songs off of it, but I guess I never realized that there was this official EP that was released. Did you guys have a chance to listen to it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually, the first time I heard Set Your Goals was actually on those compilation discs. For anybody that doesn't know what those are, Victory Records was actually notorious for this, but you would go buy a CD, say it was like Silverstein or Bayside or Hawthorne Heights. You buy the record, you open it up, and there would be a sampler CD in it, basically revolving all of the other bands off that label or attaining to certain styles of that same band that you just bought. And it was like a very good way to promote their own other bands and like make more money and generate more record buying. Yeah, I remember I had this sampler, and it was funny because we talked about rooting and hardcore, because I don't remember everybody on that sampler, but I remember for sure Set Your Goals and Casey Jones were on the same sampler. And I'm pretty sure it was the song Echoes. I think that was the first song that I ever heard.
Yeah. What about you, Trevor? When did you know much about the EP? Did you listen to it?
I knew that it existed, because they had the song Goonies Never Say Die on there. So I knew it was floating around out there, but it wasn't an album that I had prior. So when I was getting back into Set Your Goals a few years back, my wife really liked Summer Jam off of Death. I started going through and I saw that they had this EP that they re-released. It was their 10-year anniversary and they just gotten the rights back to it. And I had thrown it on at that time. And it's a great release leading up into Mutiny. But prior to that, no, I knew the song Goonies Never Say Die, but I couldn't have told you anything else on there previously.
I think that record was really hard to find because it was, you're talking MySpace days, 2006. And that record at the time was released on a very unknown label. So like the chances of it making it to a record shop was pretty much second to none. I think most of the time when I heard it, it was off of people's iPods. Or like I say, you'd go to MySpace and like make it as your like background like song or whatever. So people pull up your page, and 9 times out of 10 it was Goonies Never Say Die.
Absolutely,
yeah, that's a good point. You know, so from my understanding, they had this EP and then they re-released it when they signed to Eulogy Records, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at Eulogy Records, though, they have a stacked lineup. Though, like I know you said maybe a little lesser known, but I mean, if you're in hardcore or even a lot of metal, like Eulogy's stacked.
So, well, when the EP was first released, they weren't on Eulogy.
I think it was only a year later, though, right? Yeah, it was like a year later they re-released it.
They reproduced.
They re-released it under Eulogy later. Yeah.
Right. So they reproduced, they re-released it. This was back 2004, 2006. This is with that Zach Oren that I was mentioning up above. If you look into his background, so he did Reset and then he also did Mutiny. And when I went and I looked at what he was credited on, he was deep in the metal scene. He was producing primarily like deathcore bands, As Blood Runs Black, All Shall Perish, Blind Witness. The last release he was on was a band called Demon King, which is like that screeching death metal type of thing. Mm-hmm. So he's like deep rooted in the metal scene. And that goes back to what you're saying with them being on Eulogy. It was a very interesting partnership between those guys.
Yeah, because Eulogy has a lot of metal bands, but they've got like Hoods was a Eulogy Records band.
I've seen them a few times.
Yeah, Evergreen Terrace. I Killed the Prom Queen was on Eulogy, I guess, for a little bit. Newfound Glory has some stuff with them. Bury Your Dead. They've got a stacked lineup that label did. So it would have been cool to be back, I guess, when those bands were huge. You know, you probably would have known a lot more about Eulogy then. So yeah, then it was a couple years later that they released Mutiny, right? Same
2006, label, I think.
2006.
So this is the album that really set my eyes on Set Your Goals. What are your guys' thoughts on it? What got you into it? What appealed to you from this album?
I think the song Mutiny and Echoes stuck out. They have that song that leads into Mutiny.
Dead Men Tell No Tales.
Yeah. It's not, I wouldn't even really call it a song. I'd just call it like a chant up to Mutiny, you know, like get people riled up. You know, the last like lyrics are like a pirate's life for me. And then it's just shouting mutiny and just like fun, you know, whether you want to stage dive or you wanted to mosh or whatever. The lyrics, like everything, like we were talking about, like the chanting and the, what were you calling it? The presidential campaign type of stuff.
All the political parts of it,
like all the sharks chasing minnows when the minnows out, or
minnows outnumber the shark.
A million to one. Why are we so scared to take on the upper hand? It's cool because it's like using something so silly like that as like a metaphor to basically say, bro, there's like millions of us and there's one of them. Now, I think a lot of times that was taken into bigger context, into like in the mosh pit, like, hey man, there's like 10 of me and one of you, you know. but you know, it was fun. The record itself, as far as it sounded for me, the sound quality wasn't that great. Mixed well, but I don't think it was mastered very well because whenever I listen to that record, I have to kind of turn everything up when that album comes on. So a little monotone is probably the best way to put it.
I guess what's interesting about that, because I noticed that too listening to this record, but I don't remember that listening to it back in 2006.
Me either.
So I was actually reading this the streaming platforms had issues with it. So if you actually have the album and put like the CD in your car, it has way better sound quality. However, the mixing happened or whatever they did to it to put it onto streaming services really muted it quite a bit. So if you can get your hands on that physical copy of it, it does you a world of good. My opinion on this album, I absolutely love this album. The flow, we talked about the flow previously with Scary Kids. There is no better example of fantastic flow than Mutiny. You talk about Dead Men Tell No Tales going straight into Mutiny. They're doing those group chants and stuff like that, and it stops and it hits that opening riff of Mutiny. There is no better 5-minute pit in the hardcore pop punk hardcore scene because everyone is in the pit, amped up, ready to go for a full minute during Dead Men Tell No Tale. And then that riff hits, and it was madness. Mm-hmm. Those were some of the biggest pits I can remember. It's just wall to wall movement of people just going crazy during that time. Again, it's just 5 straight minutes, and the way that it's put on the album, there is no break, and it's awesome.
Yeah. Even their intro song, Work in Progress, where it starts off like they're singing and it's kind of acoustic-y, and then it just comes in and it just hits you right in the face. So all of it.
What is it? The first lyrics? It's a revelation, a moment of clarity. Yeah.
I mean, I just think about seeing them, right? And them opening with that and people just piling on each other to get up. And one thing to note with Set Your Goals that's really cool is the fact that they had 2 vocalists.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't see that a ton. There's a few bands that have done it, and I think there's even less bands that have done it well. But Set Your Goals was awesome. And the reason why I think it worked so well was the contrast in their vocals was great, but also their songs are so singable and they're so good for piling on each other and grabbing the mic, and to have one guy be able to sing his parts and the other dude is throwing the mic in the crowd for you to sing along. It just added to like the wildness and craziness of their shows.
So I pulled this up as I was trying to look up their music videos and stuff like that as I was doing research, and I found them at Kilby Court. So the small venue here in Utah where there's no stage and everything. And what you're saying is exactly right. The crowd is literally pressed up against them. Like there's maybe a foot of space between these guys, and they're playing the song Look Closer off the next album. And as soon as he announces it, the entire room starts bouncing and just jumping. And then they get into it. And you're exactly right. One's throwing his mic, the other one's singing. The next, they throw their mic and they're singing. But back to Mutiny, one of the kind of staples of this album are those speaking parts. And my wife hates these speaking parts more than anything. Like they start going and she's like, turn this off. You are so dumb for listening to this. But how many 16-year-old kids were like, my life is a constant work in progress. That is my life's motto as being a work in progress. And I wouldn't have it any other way, right. You know,
well,
like
no,
lyrics.
Yeah, you're spot on. And also listening to like, don't let this win over you. Like great lyric, perfect lyric for everything, right? I still look back on that lyric and think about it and use it and stuff. And there's so many like great lines that have stuck with me for 13 years now since this album came out. And it's just, it's aged like outside of, I guess, the streaming quality, but the actual musicalness and lyrics, it's aged perfectly in my opinion.
I like the difference in their vocals too, because that's kind of a different one. You know, Jordan's very low and Matt is very high, but it somehow just flows like great.
I also think Jordan was a little bit more aggressive. Like he was more, he did a little bit more yelling and stuff like that until it got to the fast parts. And that's when they threw Matt on it in that higher voice. Just it hits and it flows better on those really quick moving hardcore type of riffs over the top.
I hear that and I agree, but I also will say that they're really good. I feel like though of knowing when to switch that, because especially in the later albums, there's a lot of parts that like he doesn't yell as much, that it is more like sing-songy, right? And less yelling. But yeah, that just shows the like how creative and how great they were, and how well they used the tools that they had. Outside of Mutiny, because I think, unless you guys disagree, but I would say that Mutiny is the best song on that album. Do you guys agree or disagree?
I really like Mutiny. Like I said, there is no better 5-minute pit on an album, a pop punk album, in my opinion. That, like, I could go to a show and they could play it first, play a song, middle, play a song, end with it, and I would be happy with it. In terms of pure music, though, I really like the end of the album. Echoes is a great, great pop punk song. Really catchy lyrics, a way to wrap up the album super good. It again, in terms of album flow, the song right before, Don't Let This Win Over to You, bleeds into Echoes. Mm-hmm. And it's like 7-8 minutes of just good music kind of thing. So if I was to put on one song, probably, Mutiny. But as I'm listening to the whole album, I really like how it wraps up.
Cool. I really Josh, like Mutiny live, but I think if I was to put it in stereo or something like that, I'd probably listen to Echoes. I really like the ending of Echoes. I like the clash of the vocals and stuff like that. It kind of reminded me of like Blink-182 stuff they were doing on Enema of the State. And I was a fan of that.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well that's Mutiny. The next album looks like it had a release date of 2009. The album is titled "This Will Be the Death of Us." Probably their more popular album, I think, is what I was seeing when I was looking into this more. I think more people probably were introduced to Set Your Goals from this album. They had the Hayley Williams.
I agree with that.
Cameo. I don't know, cameo, guest vocalist. I don't know what you call it these days, but that's probably the more popular album for people to get into them, especially when you look at, and we'll go over their tours, but the tours they were doing at the time, plus this album release, that's probably why I'm feeling that way. But what do you guys think of this album? Was it better? Do you think it was worse? How do you feel?
Well, I'll jump in on this one. This Will Be the Death of Us is my favorite Set Your Goals album. I love Mutiny, but This Will Be the Death of Us. It got heavier. I felt like it was cleaner. They had, like you mentioned, Hayley Williams came on and it helped them chart on the Billboard. So it actually got them some notoriety, some popularity in terms of that. But they also were on Madden 10 was the video game that they were on with Gaia Bleeds. And this is the album, in my opinion. When I saw Set Your Goals, it was with metalcore bands. I saw them with Parkway. We saw them on Vans Warped Tour and all that kind of stuff. Because of the heaviness of it, it introduced Parkway into the scene. Every Time I Die, August Burns Red. I even saw a tour that they were on with Whitechapel, The Acacia Strain, Ghost Inside, Veil of Maya, and then Set Your Goals. Being able to bridge those gaps is incredible, in my opinion.
So between like Mutiny and This Will Be the Death of Us, they had switched labels. It's a good thing to know. And they switched producers. So we talked about them in The Scary Kids. But Brian McTernan actually did this record. I think that's right? He did this one?
Was he on this one? I know he's on the next one. He's on Burning at Both Ends.
No. Okay, yeah, no, I'm wrong. That's the next record. Mike Green did this record.
That's right.
And it's actually funny you mentioned Hayley Williams because he actually did Paramore and The Matches to kind of give you some reference of kind of where his background came from. I think it gained a lot more traction just because it was the direction they were heading by switching labels, going with the producer that they went with, and kind of trying to, like I say, like what Trevor was saying, get on like Madden. I mean, how many bands do you remember when you were playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2? You know what I mean? Like Bad Religion, and I don't know if you guys have the new one, but like AFI's on it now, and like all these other cool bands, So I think it gained a lot of traction. It did get heavier. I do agree with that. Their song, The Fallen, is hands down probably my favorite song that they have. The next one for me would probably be the one with Hayley Williams. But I think it's got really good flow. I really like the sound of the record compared to the last one. Like that to me was like a huge game changer because I could put it in my stereo and it sounded really good.
Yeah. And for those that don't know, Hayley Williams is the lead singer of Paramore. I know they're pretty popular now, but just to call that out. At the time, I don't know that they were as big as they are now. And we're still probably more on the pop punk side than just pop like they've moved into now. So it's cool to look back and see where she came from and to be involved in this album. But you look at her now and it's probably way more shocking to someone that's introduced to this music today to be like, whoa, what's Hayley Williams doing on this?
Yo, it's funny. They did so Paramore did a music video and a song for Twilight. If you guys are familiar with that franchise of films.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, but yeah, you're a vampire. Anyway, but she also, to my understanding, I think dated one of the guys from New Found Glory for a long time.
Didn't just date, married.
They're married.
But I think that was her kind of. That was her kind of.
They broke up.
That was kind of, I think, her kind of into all of that. Like she's very notorious for like breaking up fights at Paramore shows. I don't know how that happens, but that happens. But I remember in some like brief conversation she had on the microphone, she's like, "This isn't a terror show." So I think very much so. She's aware and is involved to an extent. Yeah.
Well, I think she was married. The guy from New Found Glory, I think it's Chad
Gilbert.
Chad Gilbert. I wasn't sure if it was Chad or not.
Yeah, because he was the vocalist for Shai Hulud, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they toured with, and we'll get into their tours because this was the show that I was referring to about being one of the most aggressive concerts I've been to. And it's probably because Shai Hulud brought out the, traditional core kids. But my son, his favorite song is Our Ethos. You put that on, he can sing every word to it. You talked about it being more heavy, but their pop songs on this album are way poppier than anything that was on Mutiny, like Summer Jam.
Oh, Summer Jam, yeah.
And Summer Jam is awesome. And I love the call out to some, and we'll get into the tours, but I love the call outs to like their tour from 2006 with the Warriors, which I would have killed to see the Warriors with Set Your Goals. Yeah. The Few That Remain is an awesome song with Hayley. Gaia Bleeds is up there and like could hold its own against most hardcore bands for a hardcore song.
Mm-hmm. Well, Gaia Bleeds, it's my favorite song by any Set Your Goal standards. I love that song. And it features John Gula of Turmoil, is the guy who comes in at the end on that during the breakdown. So Turmoil, straight, heavy, hardcore. And he just lays down some heavy vocals for him. One thing that I think we kind of glossed over this, and I just want to kind of make sure that it's known what happened here, is when they decided to make this album, they realized that they weren't getting paid royalties from Mutiny, which is why they left Eulogy, but they still were under contract. They had to pay something like $250,000 to break their contract with Eulogy. And when they did, they actually wrote this album and they were doing some interviews and stuff like that. And they said, "You're not on a label. What are you guys going to do?" And they said, self-production might be the route that we take. And so they had already kind of decided what they were doing, wrote the album and everything along those lines. And then Epitaph came to them and was able to pick them up. And that's who ended up putting the album out. But I think that they had this album done before anyone got their hands on it, which in my opinion is why I feel like this is a very true to Set Your Goals, who they were. You talk about the pop punk, you talk about the heavy, all that kind of stuff. It's all on there. And I think that it was because they got to do what they wanted.
Yeah, that's a cool point. And honestly, Epitaph has, I feel like, a really good roster as well. I feel like, look at what they just did with Drain. I don't feel like Drain's second album that's on Epitaph went away from, their roots either. So I commend Epitaph for being a cool label like that with some of these bands.
What are your guys' opinions on the interludes? So for Set Your Goals, this one had arrival notes. What are your opinion on interludes?
Well, it's also got with Hoffman lenses, we will see the truth, right? Because that's, I think, just like an interlude type song as well.
I think that has some lyrics to it. So true interlude, right? It's just music. So this one, I actually really like the song in terms of like just the guitar and the easiness to it and everything like that. But I'm talking outside of Set Your Goals, other interludes, the ones I'm thinking of. Attack Attack has an interlude on Someday Came Suddenly. You had the 2 interludes on Under Oath's Define the Great Line. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones, but just in general, do you guys like them? Do you dislike them? What do you guys think about interludes?
Hey, if it helps the album flow well, I don't mind it at all. And it's a 12-song album, so having an interlude and another, I guess, 40-second interlude type song that with some lyrics, I don't know what you would call that then. I'm okay with it.
From a writer standpoint, the only time I've ever done interludes is when we don't have the 10th song. So it's like interlude, intro, and then you go, here you go, label, goodbye.
So you think that's the case on this album?
Could be. I mean, say if you see a record's got 10 songs and you've got one interlude and one intro, bro, you've got 8 songs, but the contract was for 10. So you threw 2 more in there. Like, I'm calling every band out on it right now. I'm not wrong.
I mean, it's not the band's fault.
And they're like, yeah, we got a lot of fast songs. Here, just play the interlude, dude. Let me tune real quick.
The reason I asked this, Define the Great Line is one of it's genre defining for metalcore, right? From Under Oath. And it has 2 on there. And I hate that they are on there. I do not like them whatsoever. I've maybe listened to them 3 times in the, how many years has Define been out? 12 years now or something like that. I don't like them. Arrival Notes, I'm okay with. I like the song, but it could be off there and I'd be happy.
Yeah. I honestly don't mind them. They're fine to me. I could see where it just feels like filler, but I also feel like there's bands that do it really well. And especially I feel like at some shows, watching some bands, it's cool when they play their interludes. And I'm specifically thinking about The Devil Wears Prada. So they always play Kansas from Dead Throne, which is like a heady ambient type interlude from that album. And it's awesome when they play it live. So I think if it's just like with anything, if it's done right, I'm cool with it. I like what Josh was saying. I never actually thought about that, about them just needed to meet like a song requirement for a contract, but I'm going to pay attention to that a lot more now.
Well, I think it's interesting, like you say it, like playing live, because like, okay, let's say if you listen to a record from a band, doesn't matter what it is, and they never play their intro and they never play their interlude, that should be right there tell you, oh, yeah, they did it because of contract. That's what I would think from a writer standpoint, right? But if you talk about somebody like Under Oath or The Devil Wears Prada, like, I actually, maybe not on the record, I really listen to the interludes, but when they're playing live, it flows into like all their eeriness that they were going for and like their light shows and stuff. So at that point, it was like, this is pretty cool.
Okay. I can agree with that, because I really do like when Under Oath is going heavy and then you do hear that sound come out before the next heavy song. So live, I agree with.
Well, let me ask you this, Josh, as somebody who has played shows like you, do they play interludes to give a singer a break? And are you cool with that? Like, are you as a guitarist like, nah, man, I need a break too?
To be honest, man, singers are the laziest bandmate you can have. They don't help carry merch. They don't help like carry gear, nothing. They show up 5 minutes late, leave 5 minutes early. Nah, I think
they're just there to look good, right?
Sometimes I will say we did put an interlude there for like us to like tune our guitars or drummer to like kind of tighten all this stuff up. But yeah, the singer Beck, we're doing this, but I'm like, yeah, man, we're playing. You singers, you're off the stage.
Good. All right. Well, you guys kind of alluded to it, but just to have it on here, favorite songs from the album.
Oh, Gaia Bleeds.
Fallen, definitely.
Yeah, I am probably going to have to say Gaia Bleeds as well. So cool. Moving on to their, I guess, last LP would be Burning at Both Ends, which was released in 2011 and was also released on the Epitaph label. So I think when I originally listened to this album, I was a little disappointed in it. Now that I've gone back and given it some more listens, it's actually really good. And I don't know how you guys typically listen to music. I don't, unless it's a brand new album, I'm not usually listening a song or an album start to finish. I have playlists of like 2,000 songs and I'm just hitting shuffle. And that's typically how I listen to music nowadays. When I was listening to Set Your Goals on shuffle, I kept getting songs from Burning at Both Ends. And I'm like, oh, this is actually a good song from this album. You know, and then the next one comes on. I'm like, oh yeah, this is a good one too. And I caught myself thinking like, I don't know that there were any songs that I didn't like as they were on shuffle coming up. So what did you guys think?
They're well put together songs. It's produced well, but nothing stuck out like the last two records and the EP. You know, each song had something that stuck out. You're like, man, I can't wait till they play this song. Can't wait till they play this song. I listened to this record and I'm like, that's good. Kind of a bummer that I had read about that even the band themselves knew when they recorded this record that it wasn't going to be their best. They kind of said that they were pressed for time, that the label was pushing them to get the record out. And somebody had said in a thread that they had didn't really have any material going into the studio and wrote a lot of it on spot or like in the studio. From a writer standpoint, sometimes you come into the studio with ideas, but you don't have structure, you don't have lyrics, you have nothing, you just have an idea. And like when you're pressed for time like that and you're on nickel and dime, like to give you like kind of a price example, I recorded with the drummer from Lorraine Drive. And when they released their first record, they were telling me their first record cost them $75,000.
Wow.
Just to give you like an idea of like the money behind it. So I'm sure that pressure plus a timeline and everything, I gathered a lot of that plus the stuff they had going on between record labels and like what you were saying, having to pay like $250K to get out of all this. I think when you think of the name Burning at Both Ends, it kind of gives a different meaning.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I'm opposite of you, Kyle. I listen to albums front to back. That's my preferred way of listening to music. And I probably listened to this album over the last week, probably about 12 times front to back, because I knew Death, I knew Mutiny, and I even felt like I knew Reset. I didn't really know this album, so I gave it a fighting chance. And what I came back with is it was just bland. They slowed down the tempo a lot and everything like that, but bland for Set Your Goals. If there was another pop punk band who would put this album out, it might be the best album that the other band puts out, which is saying something about Death and about Mutiny and what they did previously, alluding to kind of what Josh was just saying. So this was the Brian McTiernan album that he did. And when they came to the studio, they had about 8 songs done. And he told them, he's like, hey, I need a hit song from you guys. And they jammed out Certain, which became their lead single, and then London Heathrow. And in my opinion, those are the 2 best songs on the album. So if you had 8 songs previously done and your 2 best songs are the ones you wrote in 30 minutes, that's saying something about kind of where their heads were at and everything like that. And I read something that they even said we weren't overly thrilled with how it turned out, how it was produced. And then I read a review of the article from back in the day, and I thought this was hilarious. But the review was, it was plain mediocre and leaves you with the feeling of musical blue balls. Which, you know, you wanted that release. You wanted them to do something, and it just didn't come. It just didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I agree. It's definitely not up to par with their other albums. My favorite song from the album is actually Start the Reactor. I really like that song. But you're right. It just feels like they were missing heart in this album. when I went back and started diving into their tours and a lot of their touring through their musical career and stuff. I don't know how much you guys dove into these, but when you look at like starting in 2008, so from 2008 to 2011, they were playing over 100 shows a year. 2011, 2009, you have 151 shows in 1 year. 2009, they have 140 concerts in 1 year. And they're not just in the US, they're in Europe, they're in Australia, they're in Asia.
Yep. So I looked it up.
That's got to cause
2007 to 2012, as long as the numbers are right, 718 shows over 5 years. That is insane.
And that's got to be exhausting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they did a lot of Warped Tours. And that alone, like, there's this girl that I used to work with that did a booth at Warped Tour, and like she said, just like, you're just driving to the next state and you're getting there super early to set it up, be all there all day and take it all down and do it the next day. You know, it's tour.
Yeah.
So they did 4 Warped Tours. They did, well, at least from where I was getting my information, they did 07, 08, 2010, and 2011. One of my favorite memories from Set Your Goals is actually that 2007 Warped Tour. For those that don't know, and I'm sure everybody knows, but Warped Tour was a festival that would travel from city to city across the country all summer. And they never announced what times people were playing. When you got to where the event was at, the festival was at, you would have to run in and run to a board where they had all the bands and what times they played. And I remember in 2007, they were one of the first bands to play. And we had gotten there a little late. So we're like sprinting at the fairgrounds to get to Set Your Goals. And I remember they maybe one song in, just this huge pit for their breakdown. And I see this garbage can just go flying across the pit and just drop like 4 people when it hit them.
Was that 2007 or 2008?
It may have been 8.
Maybe 8. I thought it was 7. And the reason why I thought it was 7, because I'm pretty sure that's the year Katy Perry was on Warped Tour.
Oh, if that's the case, then yeah, it was 7.
2008 Warped Tour, Set Your Goals played first, and then the stage over, it was Maylene and the Sons of Disaster, and then you went back to the other stage, and it was A Day to Remember, and then As They Lay Dying was playing 3 stages over, and I was like, dude, I didn't come ready for this.
It was nonstop from like 10 in the morning till noon.
Yeah,
just nonstop.
Yeah, I remember taking my cousin. It was like one of his first concerts, and we dragged him out to Warped Tour, right? Which is like probably one of the worst things to do because it's 10 hours of just straight thrashing in the heat.
Right.
But he wanted to crowd surf. It was the first time, so we all lifted him up. And again, Set Your Goals is like the first band, so we lifted him up during Set Your Goals, and he crowd surfs to the front. He comes running back, and he's missing his shoe. And we had like stuck around after that for a little bit to try and find his shoe, and we couldn't find it. So here's this poor kid that's like 15, one of his first concerts, first time crowd surfing, loses his shoe, then has to sit through like 8 to 10 more hours of Warped Tour with one shoe.
Dude, why don't you just go buy him another pair of Vans?
Because we didn't have money.
What we did is we had money, but I remember bringing him home, and he was freaking out because his mom was going to get mad at him. So I gave him a pair of my old shoes, and she never found out. And the funny thing about my cousin is he lost like 3 shoes throughout like his concert going years. We were like double knotting them, tying them up tight, and it was always one shoe. It was never both. It was just one shoe.
You gotta switch to high tops, man.
Switch to high tops or those like super like knee length boots that have like 300 laces.
Yeah. Combat boots.
So some of the tours they've been on were awesome. And I have a ton of respect for Set Your Goals because they were open to playing, mixed bill shows, but they always had really cool tours that were on with like really good hardcore bands too. I mean, even starting out, you're looking at The Warriors, Bane, Strike Anywhere. They played with like Gorilla Biscuits, Comeback Kid, This Is Hell, Guns Up. They did some shows with Guns Up, Ignite, which I don't know if you guys have ever listened to Ignite. Yep. If you're into like California kind of punk, Ignite's awesome. I love Ignite. They did a Newfound Glory show with Census Fails. A Curse of Memory, the Receiving End of Sirens, which I thought is a really interesting band to have on that tour. They played with Big D and the Kids Table, Anti-Flag,
Yep.
Alexis on Fire. Alexis on Fire is one of those bands.
Headline tour.
Yeah. And Alexis on Fire is one of those bands that I felt like would bring out a rough crowd as well. Yeah, they had the Newfound Glory, Bayside, Verse, and Shai Hulud.
Do you ever listen to Verse?
I haven't listened to Verse. Well, outside of seeing them in 2009 when I went to the show.
So Verse was the band before Have Heart.
Oh.
Okay.
Give you an idea.
That makes sense with who's on that show.
Let's see. They did a bunch with 4 Year Strong, a bunch with Newfound Glory, some really cool pop punk ones with like the Wonder Years, Man Overboard, This Time Next Year. And then they had a couple strange ones, right? Which was like August Burns Red, Born of Osiris, Texas in July. And then in Parkway. 2011, they did the Parkway, The Ghost Inside, The Warriors, and Oh So Rude.
Yep.
So out of all the times that you guys have seen them, what are some of the callbacks or memories you could think of?
Oh, man, it has to be that Warped Tour. So when we first ran over, it was weird because, again, they're the first band playing. Everyone's running in. 2007, 2008, you got to remember cell phones are flip phones. Everyone had razors or things like that. And the first thing you did was you flipped it open, you took a picture, and you just ran. You just got to where you were going. So we get there, and there's like 20 people, and quickly it was a wave that just rolled in. And like you said, it was probably the second or third song where they played Dead Men Tell No Tales. And that was the 5-minute Dead Men Tell No Tales. Everyone's getting ready. The pit just opened. Everyone's piling in. And Mutiny hits. And this is where you step back. And it was probably 50 feet wide of kids just moving, just going nuts for these guys. And it was... So this is a year probably after that album had been released. So everyone knows every lyric, everyone's singing, everyone's piling on. It was one of the most fun Warped Tour pits that I've been in.
I saw him once. I saw him at Warped Tour a few times, but I want to say it was either later in 2008 or it would have been early 2009. I can't remember, but I remember who they toured with. They played at a Murray Theater. Around that time, there were a lot of venues you couldn't mosh at. They literally would put boxes in that you could mosh in, or they just straight up say no moshing. They'd make everybody stand, which sucks for the bands. But I mean, at the time, Salt Lake just kind of carried a reputation of just stuff that would go on at shows and security or whatever. It was really funny. So the whole show, the whole night, went fairly cordial as it can be. And then Set Your Goals played. And it was like, as soon as they started playing the same thing, like Dead Men Tell No Tales, everyone stopped caring about the rule. And people were just getting dragged out, kicked out of the show for moshing. They probably lost 90% of the crowd by the time the set was done. And they just kept playing. That was pretty fun. Yeah, other than that, and a couple Warped Tours, I didn't really get to see them too much. But they were definitely still a staple between all groups of friends I ever had and stuff like that. It was just whether you were hardcore or a pop punk kid or just a kid I grew up with. I don't think it was ever anything bad was ever said about Set Your Goals.
Yeah, that's and just to finish up, why I chose to pick Set Your Goals is it's a band that you can get people interested into things like pop punk or hardcore. It was a band that you can flip on with your kids. I mean, my kids love them. They practice stage diving over the couch whenever I put Set Your Goals on and stuff. My 7-year-old's trying to learn to two-step to some of their breakdowns and on the Mutiny album. And it's just one of those albums that's like a feel or just a discography in a band that is just a feel-good band, and it reaches out to all these different genres, different people. And it shows with the tours they've done with all the mixed bills. And I don't think you tour 700 times in 4 years if people don't like you. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think it speaks a lot to who the band is, and they're awesome, and it's one of my favorite pop punk bands of all time. So,
well, to go back just a little bit, did you guys ever listen to their one-off singles that they had?
Yeah.
I'll Walk It Off Right Now, and what was the other one?
I don't remember the name of them, but they're good.
It's All Walk It Off and Only Right Now.
Yes.
I mix them up. So those two songs were actually produced by Chad Gilbert from New Found Glory.
Oh, nice.
If I'm right, those two songs were actually released after Burning at Both Ends.
Yes.
And then they had actually announced that they were going to be releasing a new record produced under Chad Gilbert. And then their drummer left the band in 2011, 2012. And then that's kind of when the hiatus started. But, since, rejoined, they're kind of doing their thing or whatever. But you talk about that musical blue balls. That sucks because those two songs, killed any song on Burning at Both Ends. And you're like, they were coming back, man.
Yeah.
So I did a little bit of research as to why I was so disappointed with that album. So it was 2011, Burning at Both Ends. And if you look at what was going on at that time, so Set Your Goals put out a lackluster one. 4 Year Strong put out a lackluster album in 2011. New Found Glory put out what's that one called? Radio Surgery or something like that, which I didn't super care for. The older bands were very lackluster, but you know what came out? You had Neck Deep put out a new album. Wonder Years put out Suburbia. The Story So Far put out their incredible first album and stuff like that. That year kind of reignited the scene with a new wave of bands. And to your point, it was after that they put out those singles. I think it reignited the fire in some of the old bands. I think that Set Your Goals would have had incredible stuff, but 4 Year came back super strong. Newfound came back super strong. Some of these older bands after that year came back super strong because a new wave was coming in.
Yeah, no, that's a cool point. And again, I mean, it's a good album, but after so many years of so much touring, they're bound to get a little exhausted. And I think that's a great point that these new bands coming out probably reignited the passion. I mean, it did with us. Look at us, coming back and listening to a lot of this music, and it says a lot about the new bands coming out. And honestly, in the pop punk genre, there's awesome bands coming out in the last year or so.
Yeah,
there was a story that they were actually supposed to get signed to a label called Decadence, which is Pete Wentz's label.
Oh,
I mean, it's all rumors, right, and allegations, but apparently they showed up, had the idea pitched to him, and then Jordan stage dove that night and knocked over a $400 monitor, and it got billed to Fall Out Boy. And they cornered him in the back, wanted him to pay. And they're broke hardcore kids, man. They don't got $400. And he's allegedly, I guess, ever since then, they never returned the emails and stuff like that. And they ended up signing 4 Year Strong.
Set Your Goals. And they just kind of say from there, it was just kind of, you move from one label, try to buy it out, go to another label, and it doesn't go that well. And the next label, and all of a sudden you get passed up, and this, that, or the other. And it was kind of just, you know what? I got to do something else. I don't blame them.
Well, so Matt Wilson does have, I don't know if you would call it a side project, but Near Dark is awesome. It feels like Set Your Goals. It's good, fast, kind of heavy pop punk. So if anyone needs something new that they can reminisce on that Set Your Goals feel, go check out his new band. But other than that, I think that kind of wraps up Set Your Goals for right now, unless you guys have anything else.
I hope they come back for some tour. I hope something turns 10 or 15 or 20 years at this point and they come back, because I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go see them live again. So
I know they played like a show in 2019. No, they made a post in 2021 of like the making of Goonies Never Say Die video from 2005, a music video. And it sparked it, go through the comment section. It's like, you coming back? You coming back? So,
which if you want to go and see kind of what the underground hardcore pop punk scene looked like, go watch that music video. Goonies Never Say Die is just fun. And that's what we all enjoyed.
Yeah. So. I know we're running long, but we didn't even bring up their best song, which is Put Your Hood Up.
Put Your Hood Up, yeah.
From Punk Goes Crunk. That's easily top 5 song for theirs, man. We bump to that all the time, you know.
Oh, so. For sure. I don't know if it's applicable in today's music for us, but 2008, that's what they opened with at Warped Tour. They came out bumping, all the kids were jumping, right. And then they hit. You know what? I think they went straight into Mutiny in that year from Put Your Hood Up, and it went just bonkers.
Yeah. They played a cover set. I can't remember the year, but they called themselves Set Your Grolls, and they just covered Nirvana and Foo Fighters.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
So, no, super fun band. Always exciting. You said you were always happy to be in the pit. You listen to metalcore, you get in the pit there, and you want to angrily fight someone. You get hit in the face and set your goals, and you're still smiling.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. So cool. Well, thank you guys. And if anyone wants to comment, tell us their stories about Set Your Goals, hit us up on social media. We're at Pit Therapy on all the cool social media platforms. So let us know what you guys think.